Okay, we are recording. All right, so for our next installment, we are very lucky to have Kim Martin-Cotten here with us, who is, I don't know, just a remarkable actor with an incredible background of acting all over the place, which I always think that that's a great thing. Like if, that's something I think that is remarkable when you can say, I've been all over the country, everybody wants me, right? And every state wants me, right?
Or you're on the run from something.
Oh, it could be that you burn a bridge and you have to go to the next place. That's true. But we're here to get some insight from Kim, just about her background and what kind of got her moving towards this wonderful art of theater. And then I want to delve a little bit into her her affinity for Shakespeare, and something that I always enjoy talking about, and we can get some wonderful wisdom from Kim. So Kim, welcome. Thank you for coming in.
Jay, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Oh, good. All right. Well, so let's talk about. I was just fascinated always about like what is the moment, what is your childhood, or what takes you to this profession of theater when there's so many other things that we can be that are practical, but we all of the actors kind of fall in love with theater. And what was your moment?
I never thought I'd be an actor, ever, ever, ever. I grew up in a household with a mother who's a professional both in music and visual art and design.
Mm-hmm.
So my brothers and I were relentlessly in every kind of arts class you can possibly imagine through our childhood. And some of it was wonderful, some of it was agonizing, but we tried everything. Yeah. And I grew up in upstate New York, and it happened to be a little city that was thriving in the 70s. So amazing dance, amazing music, amazing opera company, lots of visual art. So it was ripe for learning from incredible professionals, mm-hmm. whether I liked it or not at the time. And I guess I was pretty shy. So performing was not something. I did do a lot of dance, and I got lucky to dance with Bill T. Jones, who had a company there and at that time. And so I had a lot of dance that I felt comfortable with, but the minute I was in an acting class, that was sort of terrifying and not my thing. But I fast forward to high school when I got tricked by my best friends to be in a play. I was entirely tricked into doing my first play, which was a Harold Pinter play. And I was
a high school Harold Pinter play.
Yes, yeah, 17. They thought that would be a great final senior project. And I think I was mostly confused by the experience, but it was wild.
Tell me it wasn't betrayal. It wasn't betrayal.
No, God, it wasn't.
Yeah, I can't see a high school. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It was a Kind of Alaska, one of his short stories, short plays, where I played an older woman with dementia. So my confusion fit the part, I suppose. And so I survived that. I don't know how, but went on to college, not expecting to be in theater at all, thought I'd be a marine biologist or an ecologist, something in the sciences. Mm-hmm. And I played a lot of lacrosse and never thought I'd be back in theater. And I went from a co-ed bohemian Quaker school for high school into a college that was a women's college and was too much like a finishing school for me. Too many, too many gals I did not connect with. So I left and ended up going home to spend the summer in my hometown, which is Binghamton, New York. And my mother was away in Europe for the summer. And so she wanted me to have something to do. So I started painting sets for the local theater. That was a small professional theater associated with the theater department at SUNY Binghamton. And I fell in love with set design and painting sets and all the people I was meeting who were doing all of the behind the scene work for theater. And so that was my way in. And I really thought I was going to be a set designer. And that started to change as I had to do everything it was a great BA that sort of functioned like a BFA. We had 5 theaters. We had the small theater that was the professional theater. So I knew I was going to be in theater then. But I started to move towards the realization that directing was what I wanted to do. But I came late, in my mind, I came late in my early 20s to theater. So I thought, well, I have to go to grad school. Unlike some of my friends who are jumping into the profession, I have to go to grad school and I should study acting because all of my teachers who are good directors also know so much about acting and I don't know enough. So I again, had no idea what I was doing and threw myself at the ERDA process and was accepted by a bunch of schools. And I thought that they might just be crazy, but I had some opportunities to connect with some good people. And I ended up going to grad school for acting with the intention of being a director so that I would go to grad school for acting and then seek out my training as a director. So I went to grad school with no frustration of anything that anyone told me I had to learn to do better because I thought, well, sure, because I'm going to be a director. I'm not a great actor. I'm going to be a director, but everyone was certainly moving me forward as an actor. And as I graduated, I started to get work immediately. And when you're getting a paycheck, sometimes you think, well, maybe I should take some work for a while. So there was something that happened in that process of people very much believing in me as an actor and me finding it interesting for a while that sent me out into the world. And I started doing a lot of stage work. And my bread and butter was Shakespeare because I had a big voice. I went from having a tiny, shy voice to a big voice that I didn't know was there. And then it was there. And then it was something people thought, hey, I can use that on my stage. So that's how I stumbled that direction, always intending to go back to train as a director. But then I also started directing a medium amount, and had this balanced experience of coming up as a professional actor and also developing my skills as a director. So somewhere in there, I embraced the fact that I had become an actor and that there were many things about theater that I love, and those would continue to open up if I wanted them to. So I don't know that there was one moment, and certainly I still wrestle with which part of the theater I'm most interested in. I think there are cycles of loving acting and cycles of loving producing and cycles of loving directing and teaching. And so all of it is, it makes me better.
Basically love the world of theater, basically, right? So any way to be a part of it. But it's funny because when you really think about it though, so we're going to say you and I are going to do Much Ado About Nothing. There's probably 15 to 18 roles we can cast, but there's only one director. So there's a little more opportunity, I think, with being an actor first, at least to get in there and to find, like you said, your paycheck. But I think it's also great to approach the roles from a director's standpoint. It sounds like you had a director's eye, and you probably, there's a thing in sports where they talk about, even when they're even talking about like basketball or something else, about having a quarterback on the field. And I think there's something about those actors who are directors who they tend to know what they're doing on stage, right? And you probably had that eye maybe, and that I don't know. What do you think?
Yes, I think so. But you also want to get rid of that eye sometimes because you need to
be a little too technical
watching it.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
do think that as a director, it makes me a much better director to have an understanding of what it is to be within um, as an actor and to be working for something, for discovery. And I think it makes me better in helping people find that for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah,
That's great. And I also think they kind of feed each other. I think, I think if you're an actor, you understand the world of directing and vice versa a little bit better, so.
Mhm.
So anyway, but I think that's great. So so let's if you don't mind, let's just delve into the Shakespeare. Let's talk about it. So what is it? This obviously probably I probably wouldn't even be arguably the greatest playwright of all time, the most prolific, right? Why are so many people intimidated by this playwright? Do we think? I mean, we all read it in school.
Yes.
I think it's a little daunting, right? We don't necessarily understand what all the words mean the first time we go through. But we end up loving and understanding, or at least knowing the stories. And, it's kind of, what I don't know. I would like to hear your opinion on this. What is it that drew you to Shakespeare other than it seemed like the tools. But what was it, can you think of anything specific? What was your first Shakespeare play? Let me ask that. Do you remember?
My first Shakespeare play was Pericles. Pericles and then Winter's Tale. So I had two in a row and they couldn't be more different. And I think in a way I was drawn to it, but it was also, it had to do with, for me as an actor, the scope of the brilliance of his language that has I don't know, I feel like I can unpack it and unpack it and unpack it and still discover more every time I mean, I have one role I've done 6 times, and every time I do it, I find new things. And it feels so exciting to discover that new twist or liberation of an idea. And so I find it feeds my mind. It also feeds my body, because I feel you need your body and your voice to be incredibly open and available to the scope of what he's asking you to consider. So you have to have the interest in the language, the interest in the depth of the humanity of each character, and both the conditions of their world as far as where they are as a king, but where they are as a human as well. And then also, I think to find the physical life to make it come alive, and also to share it with your audience. So as you said, some people come to the theater thinking, I'm seeing Shakespeare and it's really good for me, but I'm not going to get a lot of it, And I think that as an actor, to find a way to physically and verbally and vocally and emotionally share it so that your audience actually receives it is what is our job as an actor in Shakespeare. So it has a scope that has all the skills that you have to bring to the table to make it sing, to make it soar, and to make it really, really good. You have to be invested on all those levels, I think.
So, yeah, and that's great. So do you think that it is, with all those things you talk about, I mean, we'll unpack those a little bit, but do you think it's such a challenge in that it is that people don't know how to move as a king or a queen or anybody, a character that was written? And so that maybe that's a little, and first of all, they don't know necessarily how to talk. I always love it when they come in with an English accent and they're doing like Romeo. I was like, well, Romeo's from Italy, by the way. So you don't need either one of those accents, by the way.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think they don't know how to talk. They don't know how to move. They don't know what it's, but to me, it is, all the characters, like what you said, are so human that they're so much fun to play, because they're as human as we are today, and they will be as human forever, you know, just because they're just written that way. But let's talk a little bit about, you said matching those three things. You've got the words, the voice, and the movement, or the intention, I guess, the emotion, the intention, with the voice and with the movement. What kind of, and I know that's not an easy question here, Kim, I'm sorry, but what kind of training do you think, or what is the practice like? Okay, someone hands you a script, you're going to play Beatrice, right? So someone hands you the script. That's a little bit different, obviously, playing Beatrice than would be playing Portia. Little different mindsets, right? Just a little bit, personality-wise. But still, so someone hands you the script, and what's your process? You know, if you don't mind talking a little bit about that.
Well, I would say my process with Shakespeare is much like my process with anything. And I find that there are things that are like Shakespeare, like Tennessee Williams, to me, is like Shakespeare. Sometimes when I'm doing a Greek play, depending on the adaptation, it's like doing Shakespeare. It has an epic capacity. It has an operatic size and a humanity. So I don't think about it. So I have to dissect it, because I've done it. It comes to me in a way that is sort of a package now. But if I were breaking down my process, I would get a script, and Beatrice I'd played a couple times before. But if it were Beatrice, I'd read it as though I had not done it before. I'd read it again, and it would be both familiar and new things would pop up. And sometimes I've already had a conversation with a director who's a new director for me on a project. So they will have different ideas about Beatrice than I have had about her in the past. And so I read it with an openness in mind. And I also, as you return to something, you can't help but pass through the things that you knew about it before a bit. But I try to let that go so that it can have a fresh eye. And then it is important for me, and this is not for everyone, I try to digest the language in a way that is knowing that there are sections that are fluid for the audience when I speak them, that are do not hit the ear in a difficult way. And I know that there are sections, or I find out in a new play that I haven't done a role in, that there are really dense sections with huge thoughts that need help for the audience. And I also have to know how to do that so that it's not just making sense in my head, but it's making sense for the people who will receive it. And for me, that's about really having a mind to how to land what is the center of the idea. And there are a lot of technical ways into that, but I would say that mine is mostly about considering how a word is received, but how will this fadge? That's just a line that, you know, Viola has, and the audience doesn't really know the word fadge. That's just an easy one for me to grab, though. But, you know, they will understand in the way that you decide to share it with them. And it doesn't mean that now I'm getting really technical, but it's not about hitting it hard. It's about carrying the idea and then moving through so the audience can receive it. And there are certainly sections, there's a couple sections that I can think of in Lady Macbeth, where she's saying something that goes on for a while and is really hard to share. So you really have to think about bringing it close to yourself and understanding the heart of the idea. So I do a lot of talking aloud to myself like a crazy lady, and moving through speeches over and over again, moving through phrases over and over again, just to hear them for myself and to understand where the catching points are. And also not worrying terribly about fadge being a word that's unfamiliar, and finding the flow of it so that the idea sails for the audience. That's not a particularly hard one. It's just a word that is different.
Yeah.
Use now. And then
we should bring that word back, by the way. It's a great word.
I know, it's a good word. But then something that's really important to me is I'm not doing too much that's in stillness, because I think that sitting and memorizing is not my way. Moving and memorizing is my way, or absorbing more than memorizing, absorbing it back or absorbing it for the first time, so that when I am every day going into a rehearsal, I have more freedom with my language, so that I can have my body finding answers to what the scene or the monologue or the, what that character needs at that moment. And, certainly, yes, my movement, if it's a queen, is different than my movement if it's Audrey, the goat shepherdess in As You Like It. But I have to have the freedom of my body in order to find who that is.
Yeah.
So if I'm working so hard on the language that I'm not allowing it to drop to be free, so that I can find it in here. So I try with plays that are heavy language plays, and that would be, Williams as well, to be free and studied, so that I can find the physical freedom, the emotional reality, the character specificity, and let it all in a 4-week rehearsal process have a way of, there's an alchemy, I think, that happens. And in conjunction with your director and your scene partners, you find out how that all works.
Yeah.
That was a long answer?
No, I think that was wonderful, though. I think it's great. And I started thinking about, like, especially if you're a young actor, like, let's talk about it, like, in the context of maybe choosing a monologue, right?
Yeah.
So they're choosing a monologue. With what you even just brought up, are you more inclined to teach a young actor, to tell a young actor, maybe try prose first and then go to verse? See, verse to me is easy because I feel like I have a key to that. Yeah. That's where I find the rhythm. I find the words that I think Shakespeare was trying to get us to emphasize as an actor. But there are some, like we talked about, Benedict and Beatrice, right? Benedict has some great speeches. They're in prose, and I think people like those because they're more. I think they feel like they're easier to. What you said is the audience will understand that a little bit better. They don't feel like they have to. I'm going to make up a word. Poetryize. They don't have to. They don't have to turn it into poetry and feel like they're speaking poetry. They feel like they can speak as a human when they do prose.
Right.
I prefer verse personally, but I'm curious on what your thoughts are between the two. Because I think Beatrice has a lot of prose. I think Much Ado has got a lot of prose in it.
It does.
Mostly,
it does.
Yeah.
And it goes back and forth sometimes. And I find for myself, the structure of verse helps me learn it really quickly.
Yeah.
Because I've been in it a lot, but I don't ever think of it as poetry. So I think that is something that people new to Shakespeare sometimes think this is poetry, and it's a structured form of language, but it is not as far away from a human expression as sometimes really. I mean, there's a lot of variety of poetry out there, but it doesn't have to sound different necessarily than the way we're talking to each other. It just has a lot of structure in there that features certain things. And I too, I'd rather turn around and learn a new verse piece than a prose piece. But I will say that it depends on the piece. And if I were advising a young person, I'd say, look at your options. What speaks to you? Why? What do you not understand? Because if you have roadblocks that you're going to have to tease out, you need to you'll have to spend some time with that. But I mean, for instance, Portia with Brutus, um, it doesn't sound like poetry. It sounds very much like the way, talk to someone. And there are pieces throughout his work that sound more available than other pieces, that are certainly, I mean, she's in a situation where she's talking to her husband who is keeping something from her and is getting out of bed at night, and she knows it, and he usually tells her everything, and he's not telling her everything. And if you read that speech and that scene, it is very much like something you might say now. It has a structure that is not difficult to feel at home with. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Absolutely makes sense. Thanks, great. And one thing, Kim, we teach, I just developed this little formula, especially as it applies to Shakespeare, is that I have the first 4 questions. I want to get your thoughts on this, and maybe I can learn something from you too. Not that I'm not already learning already. But when somebody gets a Shakespeare monologue, and we just recently had a Shakespeare contest. We're doing all these safer at home contests, we're calling it. So the kids can do all of these things. We had music and monologues and things like that. And I gave them, I didn't say go out there and pick monologues, because they generally pick the ones that don't necessarily work that much or aren't quite appropriate. And the 2 I picked for the women, I picked 2 for men, 2 for women, but I said there is no gender. If you like any one of these 4, pick it.
Great.
And then I also intentionally I picked Portia's The Quality of Mercy, and I picked Amelia's speech in Othello, where she's talking about husbands and the whole what do husbands do when they trade us for others and all of that. And most all of them picked that one. They picked the Amelia speech, and I would think that they would pick the Portia speech because that one speaks to me a lot. But these young, high school young ladies all picked. They all loved the Amelia speech because it seems so real. They're complaining basically about, well, not their husband, they're not married yet, but they're complaining about their boyfriend and basically how men treat women not so well. And it spoke to them right away. But the first thing I say is, here's the 4 questions I ask, ask yourself about a monologue is, what are you saying? It's the first thing I want to know. I said, do you know what you're saying, what these mean? Who are you saying it to? What do you want from them? How are you going to get it? And what I see is they generally try to go to character, and you don't want to take this instinct out of them, but I say, let's worry about character a little bit later. We can add in, so the next 4 questions are, who am I, where am I, when am I, how am I? So, but we have to get through those first 4. Yeah. What are you saying? Who are you saying it to? What do you want? How are you going to get it? And that's how I tend to just try to help young actors approach Shakespeare, basically like that way, just to, because they'll, ultimately, at some point in their monologue, they'll get to a point where they're going to say a line and they don't have any clue what they're saying, right? Yeah. And we talk about how you have to understand what you're saying so then you can put the intention behind it, even if the listener is not going to understand exactly what you're saying, kind of what you're talking about. So I don't know what I'm saying here. I just want to get your opinion on that, basically.
I like that a lot. And then there's one other thing that with young people, at some point, it's nice to remind them that in the course of a monologue, like Amelia talking to Desdemona, she is either getting or not getting what she wants along the way. And that really has to be the pulse, the impulse that makes them then do the next thing or say the next thing. And there are a lot of times that people just blast through something without taking in their imagined partner, whether it's, in a scene with another actor on stage, it's a little easier. But when you're doing a monologue by yourself, you still have to think, and then Desdemona looks away, or then she, there has to be something that is the impulse to change us enough to go after the next thing, because we don't, if Amelia thinks she's going to help Desdemona understand men, she certainly didn't set out to say all of those things at once. I'm sure you tell them that, but
No, absolutely. And it's funny because let's go to the Portia monologue.
yeah.
And I said, and the first time when they come through, and what we do is we let them do it and send it in to us. And then we give them notes and let them do it again. And all of it was coming off as a prepared lawyer speech.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what if the line, because the line before it, I believe, is something like Portia says, disguised as a man, then you must show mercy. And Shylock says, why should I? Basically and I said, if he would have said, okay, you're right. You're right, let's show mercy, then she would not have made this speech. But the speech comes out of the fact that it's so clear to her that Shylock needs to be merciful. He'll get more out of this than he would have got more money. Mm-hmm. He will come off looking great. He will make the Jews will look better than the Christians in this moment. They will show mercy. And these are all these wonderful things that you get, and you get tons of money, and we all leave here and no one gets hurt. And he says no. And then that speech comes from that. Like, it cannot be rehearsed. It cannot look like a rehearsed lawyer speech.
No.
And I think that's what's fascinating about Shakespeare. And with young actors, like To Be or Not to Be, I always tell actors, and they'll come in and do it when they come into audition, because they're drawn to that speech, but it comes off like a rehearsed speech. And I said, Hamlet's not, if he thought about this off stage and wrote this speech and then came out and shared it with us, it's terribly boring, right? But if he's discovering it with us, if he is looking to us for answers as an audience, and that's why I love those, the soliloquies, is I feel like the audience has to be involved in that.
Yes, I agree. And I recently also have been working on Twelfth Night, because I may or may not be directing it in the fall, depending on how our world is. But one of the things I feel about Viola is that we as an audience have to watch her discover her world and discover herself through this play to feel close to it. And the Ring speech, I've seen it done beautifully spoken, but as a report, and it cannot be a report. It has to be a discovery of each new thing. And it's very active that way. It's written that way. And you cannot report. You have to discover. Yeah.
We've got to see her connect the fact that Olivia is in love with her. And we've got to see all of that right there. Yes. We cannot have her figure that out beforehand.
No.
Right. And I think that's a great lesson, Cam. And as far as, the discovery, that the audience needs to feel like you're just coming up with those words there out of necessity, as opposed to I've thought this out. Now, there are times I think, like, let's go with like, and As You Like It, like Jacques, how you pronounce, I've heard 3 or 4 different pronunciations, but the Ages of Man speech, that, he's such a thinker and a thoughtful person. I've seen that like completely marked out, and everything. Like he's been thinking of this speech his whole life, and but it still means something if it's something like he's discovered. It's still better if he's almost discovering it as he's saying it. Like he's thought about it, and this is the first time he's given words to it.
And I also think that even if we have something that we've been off in a cave, developing as our own personal philosophy, or somehow it on us, and we're very clear about what it is, whether you speak it to another character on stage with you or you share it with the audience because you need to share it with them, it's about, we do this all the time when we share an idea we've thought about a lot. We share it and we respond to what is coming or not coming back at us in the way that we expected, or are surprised by, and then that drives us forward. So that is a kind of, even if you, I'm going to use a phrase that a teacher used to use of mine years ago, but even if you have distilled something in the past, you have to new mint it for the person you're sharing it with.
That's great.
Bringing them into your idea, and you have to know whether you're successful or not. And there is a reason you continue in the way that you continue.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point, and that's a great skill in monologues. I think, let's talk about. I know I've said this, and you know what I'm about to talk about here, and that if there's a long speech and you come out and your objective is to intimidate, and you just come out at level 10 and you stay at level 10 through the whole speech, then the audience is going to tune out, much like if I would tune out my wife if she starts yelling at me right off the bat. After like 30 seconds or maybe 3 seconds, I was like, all right, this is a lecture coming. I can tune out now, as opposed to, using tactics. And that's what I say about tactics. But I think what you're touching on, which is wonderful, is I think more of the idea of a monologue is that a young actor should really think about the reaction to the person they're talking to and then change tactics.
Right.
Like you're not getting what you want, which is why you say the next line and you say it with this intention.
Yes, I think it's easier sometimes, rather than to chart out a bunch of tactics for yourself, to leave yourself the freedom of exploration of, well, if he turns away, I do this.
Yeah.
Oh, at this moment, he slammed his hand on the desk, so I do this. I mean, and you can play with moving that around if you're by yourself with a monologue. It's your partner is doing what is best for you by your design. Yeah. And that way you move your tactics around and find out what flow makes some sense to you in an arc of, I came in here to get what I want. I am either going to get to the end and get it or not get it. I'm going to try to get it to the very end. But what is the shape of, what is the expression of the many ways that I try? And it is about designing an imagined partner that gives you, you don't have to say, and then I get angry. You have to watch that person slam their hand on the table and then you respond. And so it's not about charting emotional qualities for yourself. It's about allowing the imagined actions of your imagined partner to pull them out of you. And I think that gives freedom.
Yeah. Well, and I also think it's important. That's one of the first things I talk about as well, is that learning the lines to the point where, because what we all experience as actors, we learn the lines and then we get a bit of direction and then we forget the lines because we're thinking of the direction right away. But that's where I think learning the lines over and over, going over them, and the more you learn, I think this is my big discovery as a young actor, was the more I learned my lines, the more and more I went over them, the more familiar I was, the more they came out as original. It wasn't a marked off, stand here, say it this, look left, lift my hand up this way, turn right, and then the second one of those got thrown off, I'd forget all my lines because I had blocked it out myself, through the lines. But to be open to that process of what's going to happen within your scene, and I think it's a good thing in monologues too to start to incorporate that as well. What do you think you're getting back, and what would be a normal reaction after you say this line?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and even going into with the Portia, let's talk about Portia. And I want to hear your story about being an understudy with Al Pacino. But let's talk about Portia just for a second. That's interesting about that monologue, the quality of mercy. It's what, and I'm curious just what you feel, because I love that monologue so much. When I was talking to young actors about it, I said, at what point are you talking to Shylock? And at what point are you talking to all the men in this room? Because you have the freedom, because they think you're a man, you have the freedom to put the intelligence of a woman into the body of a man right there. You can speak on behalf of women and it will be accepted because she would never have been allowed in that room to begin with.
Right.
But they'll accept your wisdom because they think you're a man. So you have this total freedom. So at what point, in that monologue, and there's no right or wrong, right, on this, but there are points when you're talking directly to Shylock, getting through to him, especially the whole, therefore Jew, though justice be thy plea, consider this, that's clearly going to Shylock, right? but at what points do you want to take that to the every other just obtuse male that's in that room, and you're like, I wanted to say this to every guy in my life already, that coming from a female, and I get to say it because I'm disguised as a man, and so as a monologue, approaching that as a monologue, I think probably some of that has to do with what you're getting from Shylock, and then maybe some of the reactions that you're getting from the crowd, and because it gets a little speechy at some points in there. So
it does, but I think that we also as humans have moments where we're emotionally inspired, that something is so in our own sternum throat about something that you're watching, that if you get to speak, we have these elevated moments where we actually suddenly become a lot smarter than we were and say exactly the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of those moments for Portia, who has lived in a very protected world. And now she's been drawn in to something that is changing her actively as she's doing it and witnessing it. And what she sees with Bassanio and Antonio is very significant in that scene. The man she loves and the man who loves him or feels connected to him intensely. And to watch all of that and need to also ask herself to have the quality of mercy and forgiveness. And, so I feel like there are many things she goes through in that moment, and depending on how you work on it with your partners and your director, you can find so much. And I think, and therefore Jew is actually herself, or at least this is one way to think about it, reining herself back into the task at hand when she has needed to say so many things to the men in the room, particularly Antonio and Bassanio, and also to remember that it applies to her as well in moments. And so it is finding where all of that sits when you're in rehearsal with a director and with your other actors, to feature what it is so that the audience sees what Portia is seeing and can connect to what she is speaking to, because she'll speak to a number of things about that idea in that scene, as you said. It's great. And it's always, there's always more, and there's always a different way.
Yeah, and I think what you and I have just, I think probably you and I could sit here for an hour and talk about that one speech, right? And I think that's what's great about Shakespeare, right? Is there's so much to unpack and all of that. I think that's the fun of it as an actor, is just getting into it. And and all the roles that I played in Shakespeare, and it was like Monday morning after it closed on Sunday, I'd wake up and I'd say, oh my gosh, I wish I had put that in, and I want to go back and play it again, and different life experiences, especially like playing like Hamlet or something, a different life experience will make you want to go back and put that into the Hamlet you played, the Portia you played, the Lady Macbeth you played, all of those.
And I will say, I have one Lady Macbeth I played 6 times. And so I have the experience that I've always, wondered about for opera singers who specialize in a role. So they learn it and they have expertise in knowing the technical music of it and knowing the story and knowing the character. But each director they're going to be in front of will ask them for different things. But they have all that music in them. And so with her, I feel like I have the gift of having such freedom with having the music of her language, not music, that's not what I mean, but her ideas and her thoughts enough in me that I can be surprised by them, both in the performing of it and in the rehearsing of it. And each time I do it, something new is uncovered, and a new way or a new phrasing that unlocks a new idea and has then a new impact on both what I'm trying to get accomplished or how I'm trying to do it or who she is. And that is a huge gift, to know something that long and revisit it from time to time and be asked to do different things with it. It's really fun.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. And it's weird. It's almost, I mean, it to be a cliche here, but that whole thing, you can never step into the same river twice. But every time you come back to Lady Macbeth, your conditions are changing with your director and your co-actors and what have you, but then you have changed as well. The next time you play it, you will have changed somewhat. And then you get to add that and bring that back into what you're doing the next time you play it, which I think is fun. Well, I want to hear some Kim stories. Let's hear about. I want to hear about Portia and understudying with Al Pacino.
Okay, that one. It was so surprising, but it was a turning point for me as a professional actor in what I was learning from that experience. So I got cast. I got cast as Portia's understudy, with Al Pacino playing Shylock when it moved from the Park. It had been in the Park all summer and it moved to Broadway. And they called me, they asked me to come in. I did some Portia. I thought, I don't know exactly why they'd want to see me, because Lily Rabe, who was playing the role, is quite a bit younger than I am. So we were different kinds of Portias, and I thought that's not usually the way they roll. But anyway, I was on the job. We were in rehearsals, and we're all just sort of gently learning things. A lot of the company had been together for a very long time. There were a few new actors who had come on for the change of venue. And it just so happened that Lily playing Portia, her mother was not well. I didn't find out about that until a particular Sunday in previews, where they decided they should share that with me. And so I went home on my Monday and had about 1.5 acts out of 5 under my belt already. But I spent all of Sunday night, all of Monday, all of Tuesday morning cramming. And had familiarity, but needed to catch up faster than I thought we were moving. So what I did also learn, that's a small thing that I learned, is once you are in the room as an understudy, know it, learn it, because that happened while we were in previews. And Tuesday, they asked me to come in and just walk the stage. And so I came in and I walked the stage. They were very concerned that I was going to trip over a train if I had a train, and I assured them that would not be my problem if I had to go on. So they said, great, you're doing well. I did not know Act 5, which is all of Belmont, which Portia really is in charge of that scene. So they said, great, we'll see you after dinner break. I went off to go to yoga class, and then I was going to meet my husband for dinner and then come back and watch the show. And apparently, while I was in my yoga class, they were trying to find me because Lily decided she would not be in. So at this point, it's Broadway sold out houses.
Oh my goodness.
Because everybody was coming to see Al Pacino do Shylock, and he had been in the Park and gotten great reviews. So every house was full. And they couldn't get me. And I came out of my yoga class, and my very funny yoga teacher said, Kim, the theater called and you're on tonight. I said, oh, that's very funny, Georgia. I was just there. They don't need me. And she said, no, I'm serious. They called and you're on.
Oh my gosh.
And apparently they had called my yoga studio. First they had tried to get me and I wasn't answering the phone. They called my husband, who knew where I was because he was coming to meet me for dinner, which was unusual. And he said, whatever hot yoga's nearest, that's where he is. And they found me. And then my production manager said, they would not go get me no matter what he said. They wouldn't interrupt the class.
Yeah.
So they felt yoga was just as important as theater. So there I was. And then
Kim, hold on 1 second. My dog is about to go crazy. I'm going to
yay.
pause this. Hold that thought. Yeah. Okay, we're back. Keep going with that wonderful story.
So I grabbed my things, lost only one or two things as I ran down the street to the theater, soaking wet. But I got there and they had not yet fitted me for costumes. So they threw on some terrible things that had been pulled, and the costume designer looked agonized because, of course, his design for the Broadway show is beautiful. And so finally, they hoped quietly that it would work out, but they took one of Lily's dresses. We all held our breath because we're very different sizes, but we're the same height, have the same shoulder width, and have the same waist width. So it all, as they got the zipper to the top, everybody was very relieved. And then they said, have you talked with Al? I said, no, I haven't talked with Al, but he sees me all the time. He knows I'm part of this and he's very friendly. So they said, well, come on, we're going to have you meet him. And he's someone who, once he goes into his dressing room, he does not break his preparation unless one of his teen children calls him from California. So we were all very respectful of his time and his prep. And suddenly knocked on the door flings open, Al Pacino says, Kim. And he said to me, he said, are you excited? I said, well, I am. I'm also scared. He said, remember, you're the hero. You're the hero. And we're all there for you.
Wow.
And so he said that. And then I thought, well, I'm glad he's not scared. He doesn't seem scared. He seems excited. What I learned later is that he loves new things. As a film actor, he's used to the new impulse, the improvisation, the new take. And so he loved having something new to bounce off of. And so I spent the next few hours being put into different costumes by wonderful dressers, being moved around to new entrances because I didn't know anything about the backstage. And so they'd put me in the right place and I'd go on. And while I was off stage, I was learning Act 5 because I did not know Act 5.
Oh my goodness.
So I was on stage doing the thing in the moment, and off stage they would be changing my clothes, and a PA, a production assistant who was this wonderful young man, was just running lines for Act 5 with me. And I'll tell you that there is no space or time to be scared because you have a very specific job to do it every second when you're an understudy and you're new to the team. And I have a very strong, the ship must not go down kind of response to crisis. So I was very engaged in showing up and making it easy for others. And by the time I got on stage for Act 5, I missed one line.
Wow.
I missed one line, and my friend who was playing Antonio gave me a little smile and helped me out. But it was kind of electric and wonderful, but what it was, and then I played the role for a week because Lily was with her mom. And what I learned is for everything that I like to feel so specific about, and that I've investigated it from every angle and I understand it fully. If you know the words, you know the story, and you have a sense of where you might move in the world, you can do the play fully. And so for me, it was a wonderful experience. No time to be scared, and the liberation of do the next thing. And, you know, it sort of was like jumping off a cliff and actually flying. And so to do that midway through my professional career was a really interesting adjustment to how I rehearse now, which has a lot more looseness to it and freedom. than it did before I did that.
Yeah. No, that's remarkable. I know a lot of actors who would have just, been terrified. I probably would have been one of them too.
I
And there
was.
probably was a little bit of terror in you. Yeah, that's
There
right.
was. I
Yeah.
was terrified and thought I should probably leave until I started the show, and that is a normal understudy response, even when you are a practiced understudy, until for your first time on for any role, you think for about 2 minutes prior to entering the stage that you should probably just leave the theater and ask forgiveness later. And then it goes beautifully, or and it goes well.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Well, it's also one of those things. I think it's a testament as well. Is that probably could have been two things for you. That could have been potentially a disaster, right? Say that you weren't
Sure.
prepared. They're like, oh, even though you were thrown into it, but if you had shrunk from the moment, so to speak, then there's probably a lot of people who would not have wanted to cast you again and work with you again, and you
Sure.
you thrived in that moment, and then all of a sudden, it's leading to it probably helped with a lot of other things that you did. So I mean, one of the things we talk about is being prepared and being
Yeah.
prepared to be successful.
Yeah.
So when the moment of success comes to you, you can take it, right? But if you're not prepared, that's what all that training is for, right? Then
But I was under the gun to be prepared in a way that I didn't know I was going to have to be.
yeah.
And so suddenly it was accelerated. But the thing also, I mean, I didn't think about it much in that moment, but what I would say to someone who is facing an understudy moment where they felt like they were being pushed before they were ready is that the audience also, that's a very famous play, but they're not going to know, unless they've been in the room working with us, what's been decided about a lot of it. And some of it is just about committing to what you do know and believing that you can move through things where you find yourself almost knowing, and so there is that understanding that you are giving a story to an audience who is seeing it for the first time. And that's always true with any play. And even if it's a very, very famous play, there are times that things are changed in famous plays too. So
Yeah.
that's liberating.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too. Yeah, the audience is just there to experience what is in front of them.
Yes.
They didn't go out and memorize the play before they came to see it. And
No.
they're not assessing you from that. So I think that's a good bit of advice to remember as an actor. So all right. Well, so what are some of tell me about some of your favorite roles? What are some of obviously you've done a lot. And did I see that you got to play Julius Caesar?
I
Did you?
did. I did.
Yeah.
It was great. And it was at the time that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were vying for the
The
Democratic.
nomination. Yeah.
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 And so it was really interesting to play Julius Caesar as a woman and hear those words that Cassius says about, but Caesar is ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
But Caesar is ambitious. And how that lands on the world of a leader being a woman, and what it is to wrestle with all those ideas if the leader is a woman. And it was wonderful.
Was that a show? Was it an all-female cast, or was it
No.
normally cast? I mean, were you the only
Gender reverse?
Yeah, gender.
No, we changed Octavia to Octavia, so
Yeah, that makes sense.
it was my son. It was my son asking me not to go, and that was a great adjustment to that relationship.
Yeah.
It could have remained as it was, but it was interesting to have it be family and have it be a mother-child relationship.
Yeah.
And everything else, there were some women in the Senate because it was a small cast show also, but no, nothing else was radically different.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great experience. I'm sure that, just to, and I think it's funny that you mentioned that, because I always say that there's hardly a thing that happens in our lives and in the news that a Shakespeare speech or play or at least a few lines don't that wouldn't apply.
That's true.
And I love the idea of you doing that about the time that we were trying to decide if Hillary, you
Yeah.
know, the first time we were trying to decide if Hillary was going to be,
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh,
Yep.
so I think that's great. So some of the places you've worked, like I said, we talked about you've worked all over the country. What are some of your favorite places? You're not picking one above the other. You're not sliding anything else. So.
I love working different places, and special projects can happen anywhere and can happen at a big theater or small theater. So I guess, maybe I have three favorites. I don't know, favorites. They're just moments that were particularly impactful for me as an artist. And most good projects are impactful as an artist, but I will say when I was young, I got to do the Laramie Project
Yeah.
in a town, small town, Roanoke, Virginia, where there had been a hate crime that was not just like the Matthew Shepard story, but it was about someone who went in to kill people in a gay bar. And it was sitting heavily with that community, which has a very strong Christian community that feels that they didn't know how to help the people grieving the loss of, I think it was 8 people were killed and a few other people were injured in that crime, and they didn't know how to talk about it. So we did that play.
Basically, it was almost like, was it commissioned to come in there and help?
Well, it wasn't commissioned, so it had been done a few years prior as a new piece.
Yeah.
But Out Magazine underwrote that production so that we could give it for free to that community.
Wow.
So that anybody who wanted to come in, watch it. On one side of the stage was Matthew Shepard and the images from Wyoming, and on the other side were the images from Roanoke, Virginia. So it became a very personalized angle on what is a very specific documentary piece. And then every single night we'd have talkbacks, and people from all parts of the community were talking about how to come together to support each other in the wake of something that was a trauma for the entire town. And so that was incredibly rich to see people bridging differences in perspectives on how to be supportive of each other, and it was amazing.
Yeah, I bet. That sounds remarkable. Yeah.
That's a favorite because it's one of the most important things I feel like I've ever done. Yeah. When Kate and I became friends, we were hired at the Goodman in Chicago, which is a beautiful theater in a big city, to do King Lear for Bob Falls, the artistic director's 20th anniversary. And he had a brilliant, what I loved about it so much was a wonderful cast, wonderful designers, wonderful support team, wonderful director, but he had thought about it long and hard with Stacy Keach, who was playing King Lear, for years before we got to the place where he was ready to put it in a season.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Bob is great about doing, and one of the reasons I love working with him so much, is he thinks about what is the world of the play and why, and not just as a concept to set it with, you sort of set it on top of, but something that you have to answer every single piece of dialogue and every single action threaded through the conditions of that world. So we did this wild King Lear that was inspired by Yugoslavia in the 1990s. in a place where suddenly the Serbo-Croatian conflict was brother against brother very suddenly. So it was lifted up in a way that, and his agenda, not his agenda, his thought about where to put it was based on when Shakespeare wrote King Lear and it was done. They hated it. They thought it was terrifying. They loved Pericles. They didn't understand why they had to watch something so dark and horrible. And it got shuffled off for the rest of their lives. And they watched Pericles for a very long time over and over again instead of King Lear. And the thing about it is that it's very hard for a contemporary audience to understand how threatening that play was to Shakespeare's audience. And so he was looking for a place in contemporary history where all of that would seem clear and would be felt.
I wonder, I know it's a sidetrack here. You know that Shakespeare wrote King Lear during a plague. They were quarantined, right? I wonder if people wanted something lighter when they came out.
That could be. It could be.
You know, maybe that's a lesson to all of us. When we get out of this quarantine, we better do some fun stuff and not some dark stuff. And I also remember reading that he took King Lear and made it dark. That really I think the real King Lear, Cordelia did not die at the end. That she had reconciled with her father, and I wonder if it's also because he made it a much darker ending than it really was. The people that it was based on.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And then during the Victorian time, they tacked on a happy ending where Cordelia and Edgar get married.
Yeah, that's no fun. That's not King Lear.
No. And I guess I have one other that is a favorite, and that would be Moon for the Misbegotten, O'Neill piece that was playing Josie Hogan. It was a 3-hour leave stage for 5 minutes experience.
Yeah.
And O'Neill
Where did you play that? Where did you play that one? I'm sorry.
In New York,
Yeah.
at the Pearl Theater.
Yeah.
It's something that was like running a marathon. It was like being in a cycle of, like when I played lacrosse, you would have to train and you'd train and then you'd have the season. It was like having a season of sports. It was like 3 hours in the afternoon and then another 3 hours in the evening. So I'd been on stage for 6 hours, almost never leaving. But the thing about that play, which is both a very funny play and an entirely devastating, heartbreaking play, was the movement through all of the hope that is there, all of the desire to be liberated from the conditions that everyone is contained within in that story, and trying hard throughout, and then allowing them not to be reached, and finding liberation through forgiveness, and both self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others. And that's a monster of a play, and I learned a lot from it.
Yeah.
So that's it.
There's power of theater as well. I mean, not only I think the audience, if you're not in theater, I don't think sometimes you understand about that you go to see theater and, being an audience member, it changes you, but you also don't understand how much it changes the actors and what they're going through. And if it's done well, and it's some things you and I have talked about, is that you're basically seeing people mature and grow up on stage at whatever age they're doing, the role they're doing. You're seeing human growth. If it's being done right, if they're not just going out there by rote and just hitting their mark and throwing out their line, but if they're really living in it, it changes them too. Okay, so again, I could talk to you forever. This is great stuff. But we've got to keep it into some sort of time. So let's leave the audience or the viewers here with just some, I don't know, some little bit of advice that you would give a young actor who might be like a high school actor on, again, like, they're not sure what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. if they want to be in theater or whatever, just with some piece of advice if somebody's got an inclination or some sort of pull towards the theater.
Sure. I feel like um, if you'd like to try it, do. And if you find it interesting, try all of it. I am a better everything. I'm a better actor, I'm a better director, I'm a better producer, I'm a better teacher for all that I did, and that includes along the way stage managing and hanging lights and painting sets and um, you know, working at the box office. It all helps me understand how to do each of my jobs better. So
Mm-hmm.
if you like it, and try more than one thing. Try a little bit of everything. And if you know you want to be an actor, also let yourself have the experience of what it is to be backstage, because it helps you as an actor be a better partner to the people who are backstage supporting you, because they're just as much a part of it as you are. So if I'm talking to young actors, my recommendation is sample a bunch of things. And even if you're pretty sure you want to do that one thing, like I really was sure I was going to be a director and never anything else at a certain point, I certainly have been many other things. And it's really helpful to keep investigating what those other sides of things are. And also you may find that you really love telling stories and you find your own way into what it is to support the telling of a story, whether it's with your own voice or whether it's with a camera or whether it's being in front of people or whether it's helping others tell that story or writing a story. So just keep sampling.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Yeah, the whole magic of theater is encompassed in that, and yeah, we only get to the actors are the only ones who get to be on stage and make that connection with the audience. But we all really, everybody is making a connection with the audience. I remember the first time I painted a set at Williamstown Theater Festival, by the
Yeah.
way, and then being in the audience, seeing I was watching my set more than I was watching the actors for about 5 minutes. Like, oh man, I painted part of that set that 23 other people painted too, but
Yeah.
I could see my
Yes.
brushstrokes on there, and that was very important. I felt like I added to the experience, and I think that's part of what you're talking about. So,
Yeah.
um, well, Kim Martin-Cotten, thank you so much for coming in. This was wonderful. I can't, like I said, it'd be fun to talk to you for hours and hours. So
It would be.
this is
Thank you,
great.
Jay.
Yeah,
It
and
was
hopefully one day I will get to see you. We'll meet you in person and see you on stage.
okay.
That would be great. Okay, I'm going to say bye off
Okay.
camera, but we'll say goodbye for now. Thank you, Kim. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.